it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Good evening, my fearless listeners. Welcome to the Dark Hour. I'm your guide through the realm where nightmares breathe and the ordinary begins to rot. Here, every whisper could be a warning, every shadow a shape that moves when you're not looking. So draw the curtains, silence your phone, and listen closely. Because tonight's stories don't just unsettle, they linger. Ready to step into the dark? And let's open the door together. Graveyard Dirt by Al Treadwell. Rage controls all four of the girl's limbs, propelling her out the door and into the freezing night. She's hell-bound to get Mr. McPherson back for kicking her out of AP English. He accused her of plagiarizing a 3-page essay on the Canterbury Tales, of all things. She's indignant and tries to justify herself by telling everyone that the damn story is so freaking old. Of course everything's been said before. Her expulsion disqualifies her from taking any advanced placement class in the future. But she's got a plan to fix him. Street lamps light the short walk from her family's townhouse to the city burial ground. The lamps create giant orbs of yellow light for her to pass through. For once, she's thankful for living so close to the graveyard, as November isn't the ideal time for a nighttime stroll. Rogue snowflakes threaten to bring friends, and the late autumn wind stings her eyes, making her nose run. Undaunted, she zips her hoodie over her face and trudges onward. Magic and hoodoo have intrigued her since she was a child, so when she got home from school she ran straight to her room to research crossing spells and curses on her laptop. It was after she discovered a webpage describing the uses of graveyard dirt that her plan for revenge came together. Dirt taken from a burial plot comes charged with power, making it useful for any number of tricks. Dirt from an infant's grave could bring good luck, while the soil of a close relative would help win over a love interest. But what she needs to fix her teacher is the dirt of a troubled person. The more despicable, the better. During her research, she recalled her choir teacher, Mrs. Feingold, telling her about a former principal who might fit the bill. It was rumored that he'd embezzled thousands from the school district's funds and, better yet, had sexual relations with scores of students. Oh, he was a hairy dirtbag, she assured her. Conveniently, he was interred at the old city burial ground, the very one that sits a block from her home. The principal was one of the last burials there before it closed in the 80s. The grave dirt from such a person is sure to bring trouble to her target if implemented properly. The burial ground soon comes into view. It sits on an intersection of two streets, currently deserted. A parking lot belonging to the abandoned church wraps around the other side, which accentuates the muffin-like topography of the graveyard. Weather-worn headstones jut out of the dirt like crooked teeth and lean away from whichever side of the hill they're on. The graveyard itself is only about 1/3 of an acre, encircled by shoddy metal fencing. Tied to the fence is a makeshift memorial with a tin-foil balloon, presumably from a traffic accident. The balloon dances in the wind, causing it to slap against the fence, and the sound makes her wince. She finds her way to the entry gate, which sits on the side of the old church. Upon reaching the gate, she sees it secured with a chain and padlock. Ah, damn it, she whines as she wipes her nose with her sleeve. She ambles about in search of another way in. Dead tree stumps make her path uneasy, and she wonders how deep the roots go into the graves. She soon comes across a possible entrance, a gap between two corner fence posts. The uneven ground forced the back section of the fencing to lean away from the hill, through which she's able to shimmy her pubescent frame. A couple of feet inside the entrance is a wooden cross with "Unknown" hand-painted across the top in black lettering. Here she pauses, remembering she was supposed to bring an offering to give to the spirits of the graveyard. The website's author advised bringing coinage or a bottle of alcohol, the latter of which was unavailable to her. She rifles through her pockets. There's nothing, as her mother had washed her clothes earlier. She can't go back now and risk waking her parents, and besides, it's too cold to make the trip home and back again. She mumbles a half-assed apology and moves on to find her destination. God, what was his name again? A car turns the corner from the main road, and she rushes for cover behind an oak tree. She's disgusted by a hollow knot that reveals the massive tree's pulpy interior. Despite the frigid temperature, the air emerging from the tree feels balmy. She grimaces as her nose picks up on a mouldy stench. It reminds her of the one time she found a dead mouse in her community's laundry room. The slow-moving vehicle is soon down the street, and she peers around the tree to watch it sputter out of sight. Whew, that was close. As soon as the sound of the car's ancient exhaust system drifts into the night, she thinks she hears the muffled voices of several people talking at once. It isn't clear what the voices are saying, so she strains to listen. She turns her head to discern the source of the voices, but finds no easy answer. There's no one walking down the streets, nor is there any sound coming from inside the old church. The voices continue, and she realizes she can hear them best out of her left ear. Her gut heaves when she determines the voices are coming from inside the tree. She stands there confounded, staring into the abyss of the tree's hollow center. Her breath quickens. She jumps at a man's voice shouting over the crowd. "Hey, who ordered delivery?" Laughter erupts from the others, and she relaxes a bit. Surely the voices must be coming from one of the houses across the street, probably a basement party. Well, it seems plausible that sound could travel through the ground like that, especially ground that's sure to have some empty cavities. Well, the thought makes her shudder. She regains her composure and scolds herself for being such a baby. She finds it strange, however, that all the lights should be off in the adjacent neighborhood. The newer graves sit along the far corner, and she searches in the dark for the name and death date of the principal. She finds the granite grave marker in question, carved with the inscription, "Beloved educator, husband and father." Oh, yeah, right. She reaches into her kangaroo pouch to retrieve a spoon and a sandwich-sized resealable bag. Yellowing grass around the headstone is patchy, though she still struggles to break through to the brown stuff. After several stabs, she's able to break up the dirt for extraction. She isn't sure how much soil she needs for her curse, so she fills the sandwich bag about halfway. She grins at the thought of throwing the dirt on Mr. McPherson's doorstep, causing him to carry the principal's troublesome spirit wherever he goes. Such delusions dance in her mind as she seals the bag and tucks the bundle into her pouch. The wind kicks up, causing her to shiver from the cold. She's tired of being in this creepy place and decides to hurry on home. The moment she turns around to make her way to the exit, a barred owl flies into a tree immediately outside the graveyard. She scrutinizes the owl and yelps when it emits a screeching sound, like an excited chimpanzee. This completely unnerves her, and she takes off like a shot. Past Mary Maples, 1832 to 1853, Celinda Miller, 1821 to 1855, Eleanor Shank, 1794 to 1864, Hiram and Parthena Berger, died 1880, and all the babies of the Brewer family. In her haste, she becomes careless with her footing, and the toe of her Ugg boot catches on a patch of loose dirt, flinging her headlong onto the unknown grave. Her knee hits first and sinks through the damp ground. Terror pierces her chest, and she struggles to free herself, but doing so forces her legs down further into the soil. Her mind races to make sense of this situation. There shouldn't be any new burials here, and quicksand isn't real. The owl continues to shriek. She sinks lower with each movement, and she starts screaming for help at the dark houses. Then she hears the familiar laughter, this time from somewhere beneath her. Hey, what's the matter?" Her blood stops. Sweat erupts from her armpits and tickles the peach fuzz of her upper lip. At this point, she's up to her knees and elbows in the dirt, trapped. The owl changes course and calls out in a sing-song with 4 notes, changing the last one in the second verse. A voice from below imitates the call with words. "Who cooks for you?" The impersonation prompts more laughter. "Who cooks for you?" Her pulse booms in her ears. No lights in the houses come on. No cars pull onto the street. Street lamps shine with indifference beneath a yellowish grey sky. She hears a scratching sound somewhere beneath her and screams. "Who cooks for you?" A claw-like hand grabs behind her knee and tries to pull her deeper into the soil. She strains to reach for the wooden grave marker and successfully seizes the base. Several skeletal hands are now grasping at her legs and pant waist. "Who cooks for you?" She wiggles her hips and makes some progress in freeing herself. The Ugg boots are sucked into the dirt. She'll have to run home barefoot. Her legs thrash around to kick the claw hands off her legs, but one hand is soon replaced by another. Determination surges in her face as she uses all her strength to pull herself up with the cross. "Oh, if I can just prop up my elbows on solid ground." To her horror, she watches as the cross splits in half from the pressure. Her jaw drops. No. She loses her crutch and is jerked feet first underground. Dirt swirls in over her head and then settles. The owl gives up and flies off, soaring over the oak tree at the top of the tombstone-splattered hill. All is quiet, except wafting through the hollow of the great oak plays a waltz.
See You Soon by J. Beardify. See you soon. That's what my fiancée Mandy said before she left for work that Tuesday morning. I never saw her alive again. I didn't know that it was even possible for a 27-year-old woman to have a heart attack. But the doctors told me that 1 in 5 cardiac events happen to people under the age of 40. If only Mandy had been walking down a busier street instead of the shady alley she took to work. If only she'd been able to get her phone out of her pocket to call for help. If only. The words felt tattooed on my brain. We've been planning to open a bakery in November, but I couldn't manage it without her. Besides, like most things that reminded me of Mandy, our business idea now left a bitter taste in my mouth. Without really realizing it, I transformed my apartment into a sort of shrine to our relationship. I spent my days working grueling 10-hour shifts as a package handler. Then I returned home. I wallowed in Mandy's photos, clothing, books, and records. I'd watch her favorite movies with a tall drink in hand, sipping until my mind drifted off far away and granted me a sort of ecstasy through oblivion. 2 years of my life passed by that way, like booze poured into a bottomless pit. It wasn't until I met Christina that things began to change. For starters, she got me out of my apartment and away from the bottle. She understood that I had a drinking problem long before I did, and it wasn't until the 4th or 5th time that I realized our dates, for the lack of a better word, never involved alcohol. We'd go to a carnival by the beach, a picnic in the hills, an old video game arcade. Well, Christina was full of ideas. Of course, even 2 years later, I felt like I was doing something wrong by falling for someone else, someone who wasn't Mandy. It was almost eerie how Christina understood me. She knew I needed time and took things slowly. She didn't even hold my hand until our 2nd month of going on excursions together. One morning, Christina came over without calling. She brought sturdy black trash bags and cleaning supplies. When I saw her standing on my doormat with that determined expression, I knew it was time. My apartment got its first deep clean in 2 years, and Christina helped me to get rid of the remembrances that I just didn't have the strength to throw away. In the end, I only kept one picture of Mandy, an image of her baking bread with me in the kitchen, her black clothes covered in flour, and a wide smile on her face. I felt a little guilty keeping it, and for a time I forgot about it altogether. It was like I could breathe again, like I'd woken up from a nightmare-ridden nap. First breath of air when I woke up tasted fresher somehow, and I felt blessed that Christina had seen me for who I could become instead of the depressed alcoholic I'd been when we'd met. Not long after we moved in together, Christina took me to a candlelit concert and a romantic dinner. When I asked what we were celebrating, she made a toast to the health of my future business. Even after all I'd been through, she knew I still dreamed of being an entrepreneur, and that night was her way of pledging to support me while I set out on what would probably be a rough and uncertain road. Without Christina's help, I never would have reached out to my old contacts in the business world or attended so many startup conventions. Somehow, other entrepreneurs and investors seemed to take me so much more seriously with Christina by my side. With two others, I eventually launched a small IT consulting firm. It was a far cry from the bakery I'd once imagined, but I was finally my own boss. Every year brought more success, and I knew I had Christina to thank for it. Her bright green eyes and warm smile were all I could think about as I stood in front of the jeweler's stand, trying to decide on an engagement ring. Something with emeralds, I thought, to match her eyes. My phone rang. The number was unknown, but as a consultant, I was used to getting calls from strangers. At first, I heard only the sound of roaring winds, as though the speaker was calling from inside a sandstorm. They kept repeating the same phrase over and over, but I couldn't understand it, not at first. Maybe I didn't want to understand it, because I knew those words and that voice. See you soon. Mandy's voice grew louder and louder, until it felt like her lips were less than an inch away, screaming into my ear. See you soon, see you soon, see you soon. I flung my phone away like it burned me. When I retrieved it from the carpet, the mysterious call had ended. Throughout the rainy drive home, I wondered who would play such a cruel trick. An old bully from high school? A dissatisfied client? It didn't make sense. In the end, I settled on 2 simple golden bands purchased from a different jeweler. After that strange call, the other shop seemed tainted somehow. Just driving past it gave me shivers. Christina said yes, as I knew she would, and everything went fine right up to the moment we got ready to cut the wedding cake. Words appeared in the white frosting as though traced by an invisible finger. See you soon. Acting on instinct, I grabbed a fistful of the icing lettuce and pressed it over Christina's mouth, to laughter and applause. Maybe it was a bad move. After all, Christina's one request for our wedding experience was that we don't do the cake thing. But I didn't think that justified the look of pure disgust and hate she gave me in that moment. I'd never seen Christina so angry. Was Mandy trying to give me a taste of my own medicine? The cloying sweetness of cake on my lips forced the insane thought out of my mind. The band began to play, and the night went on without any further incidents. Christina and I signed our documents, filled out our life insurance forms, got listed on each other's bank accounts, and set out for our honeymoon. And yet Mandy's messages, if that's what they were, didn't stop. They showed up in the shower-steamed mirror, in my alphabet breakfast cereal, even the magnets on the refrigerator. It was unexplainable. There was no doubt about that. But once I got over the initial shock of seeing those fateful words, I realized that they could be ignored as well. After all, they were just words. I'd moved on and needed to as well, ghost or not. A few weeks after Christina and I returned to California from our honeymoon in Italy, I had my first near-death experience. That morning I was scheduled to meet a client at a restaurant along Highway 1, a beautiful but dangerous route that skirts the stormy, cliff-lined coast. Maybe it was a trick of the mist, but as I was turning out of our neighborhood, I swear I saw someone standing in the middle of the road. It was only a black shape in the white fog, but it looked familiar. It looked like Mandy. I slammed on my brakes, or tried to. No matter how hard I pressed on the pedal, nothing happened. I rolled to a stop in a suburban yard and looked nervously out of the window with my emergency flashes blaring. There was nothing outside but mist. Later, the mechanics would tell me that my brake line had been set up to fail. Well, the phone calls and inexplicable writing had been one thing. Now, however, it seemed that Mandy's vengeful ghost was actually trying to kill me. Christina could tell that something was wrong. There was concern in her eyes when I got home that night. She did her best to cheer me up with red wine, a romantic evening by the fireplace, and a steak dinner, but I was too exhausted to enjoy it. I supposed it was the accumulated stress of the haunting. That's what it was. I no longer had any doubts. It caused me to drift off to sleep so quickly after dinner. When I did, I dreamed about Mandy. We were back in the run-down hardwood apartment that we'd shared when I was still working on opening the bakery. It was a beautiful spring morning. Golden light shone through the open balcony doors. I turned over in the rumpled sheets, and even in my dream I felt my blood run cold as I recognized Mandy's naked back beside me, her messy dark brown hair, the rose tattoo on her spine, and the scar on her shoulder from a bike accident. At the foot of the bed, the closet door creaked open just a crack. I scrambled backwards in bed. The closet door opened wider, and the morning light seemed to dim. The darkness inside the closet seemed hungry. A pair of green eyes stared hatefully out at me from its depths. Beside me, Mandy pointed out the balcony window. She held a finger to her lips. "See you soon." The closet door opened wide. Something enormous skittered forward. The hairy black legs of an enormous spider, its hideous bulk hungrily toward me. The spider had Christina's face. I woke up slumped in the passenger seat of the rental car the mechanic had given me. I was in the garage with the door shut and the motor running. My head ached from the fumes. I turned off the ignition, opened the garage door, and staggered into the house. God, if Mandy could manipulate my dreams, could she also move my body in my sleep? Christina slipped an arm under my shoulder and helped me to the kitchen table before disappearing to prepare some tea and call emergency services. Alone with my thoughts, I realized that I had to tell my wife what I was going through. Christina placed a warm cup of tea in front of me. I took a small sip, willing my foggy brain to put the words together in a way that wouldn't sound completely insane. Suddenly, my arm exploded in pain. Bloody letters appeared, carved into my skin by an unseen force. "See you soon." Where were the emergency services? Hadn't Christina called them? My brain was too addled by the fumes. I couldn't think straight. Why was Christina holding a knife? As the bloody words had appeared on my arm, my hand had flailed wildly, knocking over the teacup. A faint scent of bitter almonds rose from the spilled liquid. I finally realized the truth. It wasn't Mandy who'd tampered with my brakes. It wasn't Mandy who'd fed me sleeping pills with wine before placing me inside a running car in a sealed garage. It wasn't Mandy who'd put arsenic in my tea. Christina advanced on me, a razor-sharp knife in her hand and an insane smile on her lips. "You're tired," she cooed. "Your head hurts. Don't fight it. It'll all be over soon." I stood woozily, knocking over the plates and dishes that had been my parents' wedding gift to Christina and I. They shattered on the floor as I staggered toward the door. Mandy's voice screamed into my left ear with such force that I dropped, clutching my head, and barely missed the shining edge of Christina's knife as it sliced through the air. My phone began to ring in the pocket of my denim jacket. Phone. I had no doubt that it was that unknown number again, or that my only hope was to call emergency services, get out in public, and try to stop my wife's knife with the thick jacket cloth until help could arrive. As it turned out, the nightmare was over as soon as I made it out of the door with my phone in my hand. My neighbor Taylor was out for a walk with his Labrador and 2 toddlers. The moment he saw me practically falling off my porch with terror in my eyes, he knew something was wrong. Christina knew that there would be witnesses. Christina didn't resist when the police came for her. She just stared into space with a vacant expression, a hollow look that explained it all. Helping me start my career, marrying me, taking out a high-paying life insurance policy that I barely looked at before signing. It was all part of her plan to profit from my death. Mandy had been trying to warn me. I didn't hear from Mandy for years after Christina's arrest. There were no more dark figures in the fog or gruesome words scrawled on the walls. In a strange way, I almost missed them. They were a reminder that someone was waiting for me on the other side, that somehow the strongest human emotions carry on, even through the veil of death. A few days ago, I went to my doctor for a routine checkup. As he came through the door with an armload of paperwork, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I'd received a text. "We got the results of your blood work back," my doctor began. There was a helpless look on his weathered face that I didn't understand. "To be honest, it doesn't look good. You might want to sit down." My eyes were already drifting to the message from an unknown number that glowed on the screen of my phone. "See you soon." A Whisper to the Darkness by Eric Nelson. She picked up her boyfriend's handgun, a shiny Springfield 1911 with deep mahogany wooden grips etched with an aggressive crosshatch. It almost hurt to hold the weight, but at the same time, it was the most revealing feeling that she'd known recently. She picked up the magazine he'd kept next to the nightstand, 7 rounds of .230 grain hollow points. She weighed the magazine in her hands and turned it over several times, admiring its design. Then she slid it in the flared magwell at the base of the grip. It clicked safely into place. She sat on the edge of the bed, gun held slackly in her hand, resting between her knees. She stared off at the wall, through the wall, into memories too painful and too joyous to forget. It was the stain on her wall. She picked up a blank business card that was sitting just to her left. His embossing was absolutely hypnotic. She'd held it for relaxation when she'd been feeling stressed out or anxious recently. Ever since she met her. Well, that had been a fleeting thing, something that slipped through her fingers like sand. Well, she'd been something to behold, though. She lifted her head with a resolve, racked the slide just like Aaron had shown her when they went to the woods, and put the cold barrel to her temple. Tears immediately started flowing. She knew there was no way to go back on her next decision. Aaron was gone. She was gone. She had never loved like she'd loved him or her, and now they were gone. She touched the fluted hammer with her thumb, more as a reassurance than anything. The hammer was back, the safety was off. It was ready. She was ready. She pulled the trigger. It felt crisp and smooth, almost too easy to pull, she thought. She thumbed the card. Everything froze. How had it come to this? Oh, she used to be such a happy girl. The hammer started to make its approach to the firing pin, which would hit the primer, which would then ignite the powder and send the bullet rocketing down the rifle barrel and straight into her head, making her existence snuff out in the blink of an eye, only to leave a huge mess for some unlucky and probably underpaid sob to clean up afterward. Her name was Trixie Savage. She'd gotten into the sex industry at a very young age. Her parents had been killed when she was very young in a head-on collision when they were out on a date night. She and her brother had been sent to an orphanage and became wards of the state. Her brother was adopted very quickly, as he was just an infant. She sat in there for years, waiting on an acceptance that simply would never come. She learned from a young age that she'd a certain way with men and could always get money, food, or clothing from them if she did certain things. She turned 18 and was cut loose and sent out into the world. She had no other skills, so she went into sex work. There she became a sex educator and had stage shows, movies, and escort services. She worked her way up in the world. She was proud of what she'd built all alone. Rightfully so, too. In her profession, she'd worked with many people. Most of them had just passed through her life like shadows. But then she met him. His name was Aaron. He had the most shockingly blue eyes and tattoos all down his arms, in detailed sleeves that were so bright and colourful. They exchanged stories over several drinks, and she blushed the whole time. His smile was just so charming and warm, inviting. They walked back to his place and met his dog. Then they sat by the window looking at the stars, and eventually ended up in his bed. They were absolutely inseparable. He was a bit hesitant about her career, but loved her all the same. He accepted her for who she was. He'd never been any angel, so who was he to judge? She invited him to do stage shows with her, and she didn't want to do that with anyone else any longer, but he kept turning the idea down. He wasn't comfortable exposing himself like that, raw like a nerve. Well, she understood, but kept persuading until finally he agreed. Well, he was nervous on stage, but she coaxed him through it. In the end, he was quick to leave the stage. She asked him if he was okay, and he said yes. Well, she didn't feel the truth there. He went back home and sat in front of the TV to relax. It just felt so distant. She tried talking to him, but he got frustrated and went to bed. She found him hanging in the garage from a rafter the next morning. A tipped-over stool lay where he kicked it out from under himself. She was irreparably beyond grief. She felt numb and drifted through the world, wondering how he could be taken away from her. She hadn't even known he walked with that kind of sadness and desperation inside him. He was the only thing she'd loved. Her family was gone years ago, both into the ground and into the world. Now, Aaron was gone. She went to a nearby bar and haunted the farthest stool like a ghost, hunching over a drink and requesting another. A woman came and sat by her. Trixie hadn't even noticed her enter the bar, let alone sit right next to her. The bar wasn't crowded. Trixie looked up from her drink to look at the woman. Long black locks of hair accented her perfect skin and her dark eyes. She was absolutely radiant. "Ma'am, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm really trying to be alone right now. Would you mind moving to another stool?" The woman eyed her playfully, then more seriously. "Lost someone close to you?" "Yeah, very close to me, very suddenly." "Close and sudden are the worst. Was it family?" she asked, leaning a bit closer and turning towards her in the stool. "No, he was my lover," Trixie said, tears starting to well up at the corner of her eyes. "Well, a good one by the sound of it," the lady said with a smirk. Trixie coughed out a laugh more than anything, trying to hold back her tears, but failing. "Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry, dear. I do have a terrible sense of timing with my jokes. I try to make light of the hardships in life. My name's Jin. I'm a death doula." She extended her hand. Trixie shook her hand quickly, while trying to keep her head down to hide her emotions. "What's a death doula?" she asked while dabbing at the corner of her eyes with a napkin. "I help people die and accept death. I also help the ones they love to accept their death. Family, friends, lovers. When people die, they can leave a huge emotional vacuum. The idea is to heal that vacuum so that you may move on. It's got to be a hard job. Every day you have to deal with sadness and vacuums," she said, starting to smile. "Jin, that's a neat name. It's Arabic, from my mother's side." Over the next few hours, they talked and exchanged stories. Trixie was actually feeling a bit better. She was astonished by this new woman who seemed to have been everywhere and done everything. She told stories of famous actors and other rich people on their deathbeds who lamented the simplest of things, like learning how to ride a bike, or the poorest of people who had lived the most extravagant lives, were going to the grave with no wants of missed experiences and exotic places she'd been, from the mountains of the world to the depths of the rainforests. You're an amazing person, Jin. Can I retain your services? She pulled out a card and handed it to Trixie. First one's on the house, sweetie, she said with a wink. She looked at the card. It was a deep black with a hypnotic swirl around the word Jin and a phone number under the name, no other information. With that, Jin finished her drink, got up, and swept out the front door. Trixie sat there, feeling somewhat relieved to have made another connection in this big, crazy world. She waited a full week before she pulled the card out and gave Jin a call for an appointment. Jin had picked up the phone almost like she knew who was on the other end of the line before Trixie told her. The appointment was set, and she waited anxiously for the next few days. They met at Jin's office and had a very long walk to talk about Aaron and how he'd affected Trixie's life. The world had a tendency just to view sex workers as objects for their amusement and use, not actual people. They were viewed as mindless sex dolls and not much else, never seeing the people for who they were outside of work. It was the same as it was for everyone else. Work is what they do to get by in the world, not necessarily who they are as a person. They finished their session and decided to go for an early dinner. Jin finished her desk work and put everything else to the side for the morning. They walked to a place on the corner and ordered drinks with a few appetizers. They sat until their food was cold, talking about long days and brief loves, ordering several replacements for their drinks, and laughing with tears in their eyes as they spoke of wistful moments that would have been otherwise unnoticed by others. Trixie was feeling a bit better in her mental state. She had a new connection, someone who understood where she was in the world. A weight had been slightly lifted. They went back to her place, not far from her shop, and sat to watch a movie. Later, Trixie couldn't even remember the opening credits of the movie, just the lady sleeping next to her with a slight smile on her face. She had never experienced a lover like Jin. She'd been with other women who were very intuitive with what she wanted or needed at the time, but, well, never like her. The next few weeks flew by as they got to know the nature of their relationship and figured each other out. Trixie blushed as she asked if Jin wanted to move in with her and make them a full-time thing. How would that work? Jin asked. You have your life and I have mine. My life is almost always telling people how to leave this world, and yours is about how they can embrace what they do have or can have. I love being with you. I want to be only with you. Let's sleep on it and talk about it more in the morning, beauty, Jin said as she rolled over and turned off the light. The next morning, Trixie woke up and Jin was gone. She called her to ask if she wanted breakfast, but the number didn't work. Not even a voicemail. No connection. She went on with her day, feeling the emptiness. Several days went by, a week, a month. She never got a call back. Work felt totally hollow, like she was just going through the motions. No one else saw her as an actual person. Now they saw her as something they could use and leave behind. The same story her whole life. She sleepwalked through the next week, getting hopeful and trying Jin's number again, always with the same dismal response. No response. Ever. She sat on the bed. She lifted her chin high, cold steel to her temple. Her resolve was settled. No more decisions to make. She pulled the trigger. She rubbed the card. Everything stopped. It was all dark. Was she dead? And then she was there. Is this really what you want? Came the purr of a voice that was Jin's. She felt those fingernails that always set her hair on end like electricity just around her collar. Trixie turned to see Jin staring into her eyes, that knowing smile on her face. "Are you dead too?" Trixie asked timidly. "No, and neither are you. Not yet, anyway," she said, smiling wickedly. "I don't understand," Trixie said, looking at her more seriously, looking for details that she hadn't seen before. "I'm your death doula, Beauty. I'm here to make you see your worth. What you keep inside of you is immeasurably more valuable than what connections you've lost. I understand your pain. I've seen it in thousands of stories throughout the ages. I am as old as the sand. And I've been here since here was born. Yours is a story I've heard many times. It is tragic. It wells my heart with feelings that beings like me do not often get to feel. I don't understand. What are you?" "I'm a djinn, Beauty." "A djinn? You mean like a genie, like in the storybooks?" "Yes, doll." Jin smirked at her. "So, what? Do I get 3 wishes or something?" "No, you get 1. The only one you will ever need." "What is that wish?" "Is this the decision you really want to make?" she asked, leaning in closer. Their noses almost touching. Trixie could feel the warmth of Jin's breath on her face. She wanted to kiss her so badly, but felt the gravity of what was happening. "I want you back. I want you in my life." "Well, I've never left, Beauty. I've always been with you." "Where have you been? It's been so long since I felt you next to me. You left me to the world. They don't see me as you do. You actually see me. Aaron saw me as I am and took me in. Everyone else just sees me as an object and tosses me to the side when they're done. I need you back. Do you?" Jin stared deep into her eyes, straight to her soul. "I want to feel like you need me too." "Why do you need anyone? You're strong, independent, and virile. When the world cast you out, you met it with open arms and found your own way to make it through. You don't need me. You need you. I want the companionship. You need to meet you on your own terms. Be your own companion. No matter how dark the world gets, you'll never be without you. I know it gets bleak. The world chews people up and spits them out for no reason all the time. Errands can be taken away from us at any time. Do you think it's fair for a young antelope to be taken down by a lion mere hours after it was born? It had no chance at life and was devoured while it was alive. Its first emotions were fear, pain, and confusion. You've had a fighting chance to get up and go. So, get up and get going. Or be the baby antelope. I don't want to be the baby antelope. I want to be with you. You can't have me without saving yourself. Jin screamed this in her face as wind started to swirl around them, as if they were in the eye of a tornado. Trixie felt sand tearing by her face, almost cutting the skin on her cheeks as a deluge started to whip them both about in the darkness that they shared. I wish I hadn't pulled the trigger. I don't want to die. Trixie whipped her head back just as the hammer hit the firing pin, which hit the primer, which then set off the powder and sent the 230-grain hollow point rocketing down the rifle barrel into the wall. She was back in her bedroom, and Jin was gone. The smoking barrel of the 1911 was an inch away from her head. Her ears rang at a deafening pitch as the world swirled about her and started to settle back to normal. Had Jin really been there? Was it just a figment of desperation in a momentary psychological snap? Tears came freely running down her cheeks as she dropped the gun heavily to the floor and looked about for some sense of direction. She looked in her left hand, saw that she was still clutching the black business card that Jin had given her the first time they'd met. Its embossment was shining in the low light. She rubbed it with her thumb a few more times, smiled, then placed it on the nightstand. Trixie stood with new resolve, smiling at the card. One wish her, she thought to herself. She went back out into the world with a new approach, a new solidity in her steps. She walked with more confidence in life. She never saw Jin again, but the lessons she'd learned never left. The Greenwood Syndrome by Theo Plesher. Let me preface this by saying that I spent 2 tours of duty in Iraq as an Apache gunship weapons officer. We spent most of the war dishing it out, but at the base we got rocketed 3 times and lost some birds on the ground. From those explosions I got a brutal case of tinnitus. Don't know how I did it, but after the war and some in between, I found myself picking up a job at a Central Texas school district as the principal of a K-12. I figured I was going to be the last one picked for the job, mostly on the account of my hearing, or lack of hearing. Anyway, like I said, I've been to the sandbox. I've seen a lot of chaotic things. As the weapons officer of a gunship, you have to be careful of those 30mm shells. They spread and they do some strange things once in a while. You have to take care of the surroundings. At least I did. Suppose I know some WS who didn't. Nothing about deciding to shoot or not shoot from 1,000 feet up prepared me for 1,500 kids in the same building, not to mention the pandemic. We expected a difficult August with COVID. We even expected to have to restart remote learning. We didn't expect what actually happened. I was filing the usual paperwork one morning after school-wide announcements when I was called down to the east side of the school to a 2nd grade classroom. I was met by the 2nd grade homeroom teacher, Mrs. Eddy, and much to my surprise, the school's hunking primary nurse, Mr. Thor. Mrs. Eddy was clearly in some kind of panic, as she was arguing with Mr. Thor. She explained that in the last half an hour, about 1/3 of the girls started to itch and scratch themselves on their arms, shoulders, and back. I could tell Nurse Thor wasn't sure what she was getting at. He rattled off half a dozen reasons why this might be the case. Mosquitoes, other bugs, or the poison oak no one got rid of near the west side entrance, possibly something as innocuous as an outbreak of chickenpox or prickly heat. I peeked through the window on the door into the class and saw 20 worried and distracted faces staring back, and about 10 scratching themselves with the intensity of a flea-ridden dog. Mrs. Eddy threw her hands up at the nurse, turned and then pulled her shirt down and exposed her left shoulder and part of her back. "Look," she exclaimed, "there are no bugs in the room. I went in through the east side entrance. Now I have chickenpox. Now, what is this? Is this some sort of new COVID variant? One that got cooked up in one of the kids?" The dismissive look on Nurse Thor's face melted into confusion and then worry. I peeked over and saw the beet red raised rash running up across her shoulder, bicep, and back. It was impacted by an unusual pattern of scattered darker red X-like indentations on the flesh. As Eddie shoved the rash towards Thor, he then put his own hands up in a defensive posture and backed away from Eddie. Inside the classroom, we started to hear screams, as there was a mad scurry away from 2 of the kids itching themselves. I instinctively opened the classroom door and went in for a closer look. Nurse Thor was right behind me, but Eddie was slow to enter. The 2 boys revealed bloody fingers and blood-damp clothes as they refused to stop itching themselves, inadvertently painting themselves in their own blood. Thor agreed to take the 2 bloodied boys to the nurse's office and bring back some cortisone cream for the now 12 others suffering from intense itching. I told Eddie to stay here and try to keep them calm. Then I got an intercom call from the main office saying I and Thor were needed urgently down on the south wing to a 4th grade classroom. I intercom back that we were on our way and called Ms. Valerie, the nurse's assistant, down to Mrs. Eddy's classroom with bandages and cream. I took a deep breath as I stomped down to the south wing. I was getting my own kind of heat and itch back, feeling like those hours I spent under fire, scurrying from bunker to bunker amid sirens and rocket blasts. My tinnitus was acting up at the start of the day, and it was coming in and out like tidal waves. We got to the 4th grade classroom run by Mr. Bowden. He too was posted outside, scratching his thick salt and pepper beard as he crowded the window. 6 of the kids started complaining of having a headache. I was about to send them down to you, he said, gesturing towards Thor. But then 2 of them passed out. How are you? I'm fine. At least I think I'm fine. I came into the room and sniffed the air as best I could through the mask, which was thoroughly permeated with the odor of my stressed breath. I couldn't smell anything unusual. Okay, I asked the class. How many of you have headaches? About half of the class raised their hands. Does anyone have any itching or rashes on your back, shoulders, or arms? A few of the 4th graders kept their hands up, while a few without headaches raised their hands. I'm going to put those 2 in recovery position and ask the new PE teacher for a hand getting them to the bed. What's his name again? My brain flickered. Frank Donovan. His name is Frank Donovan. I ushered Thor out of the room and then started to shut the door behind us, but he held the door open, so instead I quieted my voice. What the hell do you think is going on? Thor wiped his sweaty, bald head. I'm not sure. This could be one thing, something environmental, in the air like an irritant. Maybe multiple things like an allergen in one room and maybe carbon monoxide in this one. I don't think it's the virus, much less a virus. Well, it is Tuesday, I said. Maybe the food delivery guy left his truck running and it's coming through the vents. Maybe we should clear out this classroom and the other, move the kids into the gym and have everyone else open their windows. Yeah, it could be that, or an industrial accident or train derailment we're downwind of. Coming through the vents and opening the windows will make it worse. Could also be the science labs, I said. Yeah, do you think we should evacuate? Thor looked me straight in the eye. Like you said, I reasoned. This could be inside, outside, or something else entirely. I can't order an evacuation yet, but we should get the paramedics here for the 2 fainted kids. Well, if the paramedics can't show, then we'll know better if something else is going on outside. Good point. I thought about my staff and realized Mrs. White was in today, teaching chemistry. I could draft her to check out the labs. I could have the secretary call emergency services and inquire about any local emergencies to the air quality, and have her even check the mold and pollen count. Okay, we got a plan. I'm going to run down to the kitchen dock and see if they left their truck idling next to the vent or something. We've got this. I tried to recall my CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear training, as I made my way down to the 1st floor north wing. Mustard gases produce rashes and welts, but not for hours after exposure, and not without other symptoms. Carbon monoxide made the most sense for the headaches. There were various industrial chemicals that were also chemical weapons or proxy chemical weapons like chlorine, phosgene, and anhydrous ammonia. But all of these had terrible smells and would provoke fits of coughing and sneezing long before headaches and fainting. None of those would create rashes or itching. Of course, mold and fungi weapons were rumored to have been tested in Vietnam in the 80s. Some of these systems matched. But rather than release such an agent, I wondered if the building had some mold accumulation from last year that went undetected when we reopened. Well, that too was a long shot. None of my basic training was applicable, except to rule out these culprits, as I approached the cafeteria and hoped that there was a simple explanation for exhaust fumes. The cafeteria had glass doors and windows all around like a fish tank. Usually it was open in the early hours for school breakfast and morning preschool daycare, but it should have been deserted at this hour, save for the cafeteria staff. To my horror, I found the cafeteria to be well populated by the few dozen usual students and staff common to earlier in the morning. Everyone was either fixated forward, sitting at the long tables, or standing braced against the wall laughing. It was a laughter that was wheezing, howling, hoarse, and animalistic beyond anything I'd ever heard. It was laughter on the cusp of breathlessness, hysterical tears and screaming. There was a call and refrain between gasping breaths and pauses on one side of the room that would get inundated by the recovered and renewed wave of laughter coming from the other. I stood there for 5 minutes watching this in complete terror. Worse, as I started to come to my senses, the delivery truck was nowhere to be seen through the cafeteria windows. I dared not enter the lunchroom to answer the new frantic intercom call, which I, at first, mistook for more laughter as my tinnitus flared. I went to an abandoned classroom and heard the reports. First, Mrs. White reported no issues with the chemistry laboratories. Next, my secretary, Mrs. Goodwin, reported nothing unusual when she called for paramedics and reported that the air quality, at least according to the weather report, was fairly normal. The transmission suddenly dropped, and I clicked the button a few times to try to get the office back. But then it struck me. There was a class bell. Hundreds of students flooded the corridors in a cacophony of normal talking, laughter, and the opening and slamming of lockers that lined the halls. I couldn't hear anything, so I decided, since I was on the first floor anyway, to get back to the office. I was on my way back, trying to get through the crowded, rushed corridors, when I started hearing louder, frightened yelling coming from the ground stairwell. I approached with caution to find that multiple students had fallen on the staircase and were not able to right themselves. Several of the students looked pinned to the steps as they struggled to right themselves. They clutched their heads and shut their eyes as they rocked back and forth, trying like an inverted turtle to have their feet reach the ground. They twisted their wrists and hands about over their heads like they were turning invisible knobs. With chemical warfare fresh in my mind, I held my breath, mortified at what looked like textbook nerve agent spasms. Yet juxtaposed to these suffering students were completely unaffected students clearing the area, panicked but unharmed. I directed the unaffected students to their classes as I tried to help the dozen or so who had collapsed on the steps. 2 of them threw up as I tried to support their descent to the bottom of the staircase. When the rest seemed content to brace against the banister running down the center and sides, I decided to leave them, telling them I was going to get help. I ran into the office and directed Mrs. Goodwin to call for multiple EMS teams. I checked with Mr. Thor on the 2 students who had lost consciousness in Mr. Bowden's room. They had regained consciousness, but were now experiencing dizziness, nausea, headaches, and a leg twitch with knee swelling. Okay, it's not truck exhaust. It's not anything from outside. Think, damn it. Maybe something in the water. Did you have any coffee this morning? I'm the principal of a K through 12. Of course I had coffee this morning. I mean, office coffee. Maybe it's in the water. Maybe it's local, like some kind of designer drug patch one of the high schoolers put into the water tank or other drinking fountain spigots. That's a very imaginative frat boy prank, but I just came from the cafeteria, and everyone in there is laughing maniacally back and forth at nothing. The kids are stumbling down the steps on the grand staircase. There's a lot of different effects for the same drug. And yes, I'm pretty sure everyone here but you had office coffee. Look, it's almost all on the south and east classes which face the cafeteria annex. Maybe it's something in that annex. Like what? Well, aren't all the summer camp science projects up on display on the 2nd floor? Maybe something in that stuff is more interesting than it first seemed. Maybe it's not chemical or biological. Maybe it's... I don't know. It didn't make any more sense than anything else, but I agreed to go with Mr. Thor to the science fair displays after I ordered the classrooms on the east and south side to migrate to the north gymnasiums for the time being. As an added precaution, I ordered all other classrooms to open their windows and keep kids out of the hall. I asked Mr. Donovan and Miss Valerie to help the students on the ground stairwell until the paramedics arrived. Normally I wouldn't go searching for a hazard like this without protection, but since it wasn't clear what kind of hazard I'd be facing, if one existed at all, I went in with nothing but hope. The summer science fair displays were spread out across the 2nd floor convention center, which was about the same size as the cafeteria. There were 2 rows of displays against all the walls, and center row with displays back to back, facing their respective walls. There were well over 150 different projects, ranging from chemistry, biology, engineering, and electricity. At that point, I figured it was the stress that was causing the worst tinnitus I'd ever experienced. It was almost blocking out Thor's voice entirely. My eyes shifted back and forth on the row I'd chosen. I looked for anything, any overgrown samples in petri dishes, any overflowing test tubes, any devices that could potentially help me explain what had been happening today. My eyes started to water, and my nose started to twitch as I came to the middle of the room. I couldn't smell anything, and I also couldn't hear anything except that goddamn ringing. I eventually looped around the other side of the displays and found Mr. Thor collapsed in front of one of them. He was in a riveting fetal position on the carpet, clutching his ears. My tinnitus was so bad I couldn't hear myself trying to console him. I promised him I'd go get help, but then I noticed the science fair project he'd collapsed in front of. The project was called Ghost Simulator. The display said the device, a grey-coloured box with a thick electrical cord coming out of it, could use ultra-low frequency sound and microwaves to stimulate sensitive organs in the head, specifically the eyes and ears, with non-perceived energy to provoke sensations of being watched, dread, and the illusion of orbs in the peripheral vision. My mind jumped to news reports over the past 3 or 4 years of US diplomats being afflicted with strange symptoms not too dissimilar from those experienced today because of some sort of Russian sonic or microwave-directed energy weapon. I remember they called it Havana syndrome. Could a particularly bright student inadvertently recreate such a device as part of a paranormal debunking project? If so, how come I was so unaffected and standing right next to it when it could take down a hulking man to the floor? Maybe I was unaffected because my ears were already messed up with tinnitus. Maybe that's why it was so bad right now. Thor groaned in pain, and I immediately grabbed the cord that was snaked behind the display so I could unplug it. Then I was stunned to find it was already unplugged. The cord was otherwise tied up with a twist tie, and the plug was covered in a plastic cap. I picked up the device and took off the plastic cover to discover that the interior was empty. No speakers to pump out infrasound, no microwaves, no coils, no lights, no batteries, just the end of the cable. The display board had a flap on it. What did you experience when I turned it on? Then it revealed it was all a psychological project. Nothing was real about it, except what you made of it. Somehow after reading that, my tinnitus attack began to subside. Ambulances and EMS teams flooded the school. Air samples, wall culture samples, throat culture samples, COVID tests and genomic sampling were conducted with haste that afternoon. One by one, the itching kids and Mrs. Eddy, Thor, the laughing staff, students in the cafeteria, the fainters in Bowden's room, and the kids on the stairs made remarkable recoveries almost as quickly as they'd fallen critically ill. Aside from a few confirmed COVID cases of unremarkable strain, nothing chemical or biological out of the ordinary was found anywhere in the students, teachers, or school walls that day. I thought about that science fair project, and I thought about all these students. Well, not all of the afflicted ones, but the student body as a whole. They came in here, as primed as I was, to face down the pandemic after a 1.5 years of being told to stay home, stay apart or you'll get very sick, strangely sick and maybe die. Now we're all back, almost normal, but it was still here. Maybe it was a case of mass hysteria taking hold as the fear in the kids, the staff, and myself never got a safety valve release or relief. Instead, we were pushed back to back together and were placed under even more pressure and threat. That's the best explanation I have for it. It's the best explanation anyone has ever given to me. I just know that today was the first day in my civilian life that I was faced with losing people I care about on my watch. There's Something Stuck in My Ear by T.J. Lee. It was midsummer when the issue started. pluck those unsightly hairs out of your cheeks. They make you look weird. I remember waking up that morning with a god-awful headache, my ears feeling like they'd been pounded with rusty nails and congested to the high heavens. I assumed COVID or maybe the flu had finally caught up to my introverted ass, but I had a day of work ahead of me and I couldn't just stay in bed all day. When the voice rang out in my ear, I was startled and damn near fell over in my bathroom. An inner monologue is one thing, sure, but to have an actual tangible voice ripple through my ears was terrifying. I assumed someone had snuck up behind me and was speaking directly into my ear. But as I whipped around, I saw nobody. What the fuck? I breathed, pulse pounding and my heart in my throat. Did I just imagine that? No, you didn't. I'm in your head, idiot. You knew this was coming, right? The voice chuckled, every intonation making my eyes throb. All those years of mental health issues, trips to the psych ward, and exes telling you that you were always on the edge of crazy. Well, you've gone and made the big job, my friend. Congratulations. I leaned into the sink and felt faint, my body on the verge of vomiting as the voice's incessant laughter pushed me further. It's true that I'd had mental health issues most of my life, exacerbated by a really toxic relationship with my ex. I got free, went to therapy, and for the last 10 months had been relatively safe and free of issues. Now I seem to be staring the deepest pit of insanity in the face. This can't be real. I'm not a schizophrenic. I've never shown any signs, and I'd know because you always Googled your symptoms and confided in your doctors, therapists, and your ex. Yes, I know. That doesn't mean you don't have it, does it? A long silence before some trepidation crept into their voice. You could try something if you don't believe me. Fine. What? Sweat poured down my face as the pain radiated through my skull. Even then I could hear the smile in the voice as it responded. Smash your head into the mirror. I've heard that if it's just a bout of mania, you could excise it through sheer willpower. On the bright side, it'll give you pain. We both know you deserve that anyway, given the horrible ways you've treated others. Maybe that will help keep them away. Them? What do you mean, them? There's someone coming after you. The Great Shadow. It knows where you are and is going to come for you if you don't appease it. Yeah, you need me. My instructions to save us. Plus doing this will ensure you know I'm here to stay. So do it. Over and over again, the voice pushed me to do it. Hands gripping the sides of the sink so hard I thought my tendons would snap. I reared back my head and smashed it into the mirror with every bit of force I could muster. I heard the glass break, the hot blood cascading down my forehead and the mother of all headaches rushing to my eyes and blurring my vision. And as you can see, I am still here. Now you will listen to what I have to say, or the shadow will come to visit you. Understand? I'm here to protect you. I stumbled, legs feeling like jelly and a horrible sense of dread permeating my soul. Looking back, rational me should have known to call the hospital, but the voice insisted they'd ignore my protests, lock me up, and then that'd be the end of it. I'd spent time in a psych ward before. I didn't want that again, so I acquiesced. What follows is a series of progressively demeaning remarks and obscene demands over 3 days. For the sake of brevity and to avoid being banned, I will not list them in detail here. They involved eating less or risking bereavement over my weight, acts of self-mutilation to purge my body of its sins, sealing my windows in tin foil to keep out bad signals, and constant suggestions of taking my own life. Eventually, the pain in my ears was reaching a critical point, and my desire to survive was stronger than the voice's threats at that point. If you disobey me, the looming shadow will come for you in the night. It'll come for you, tear your flesh from your ungrateful bones, and everyone will know what a terrible person you are. The voice growled, something almost determined in it. I'll see to it personally. But I didn't care. The pain was far worse than any of the voice's words, and I called the hospital for an emergency appointment. Due to the weekend, they told me to come down in 2 hours, as that was the earliest they could find. Satisfied with the result, I resolved to take a short nap until the time came, exhausted from the pain and the constant berating. But I found no comfort in my rest. Instead, after letting my eyes rest for a time, I was awoken by the sensation of being watched. My room was pitch black, and I knew it couldn't have been long since I went to lie down, so it would still be in the middle of the night. Straining my eyes to look forward, I saw something rippling in the hallway. "I warned you," the voice growled in my ear, followed by the most god-awful scratching noise I'd ever heard. ASMR turned up to 11 and made my skin crawl. But it paled in comparison to what I was making out in the darkness. The shape of a person, tall, thick legs like tree trunks, and an all-black frame with piercing eyes staring at me, curious, with its head cocked to the side. Don't know if it was the mania, but its very shape vibrated in place, like a bad signal on a TV. Instinct took over, and I hurled the closest thing I had at it, my glass of water. I was never a fighter, but it's amazing what you'll do on adrenaline. The glass missed and smashed against the side of the wall, the shape retreating back into the hallway and out of sight as I screamed and leapt to chase after it. "What the hell are you doing? The Shadow Man will..." The voice hissed as I vaulted over my bed and out of the doorway. "I don't give a fuck what you say or what it does. I'm not doing this anymore," I bellowed, hurtling down the stairs and towards my hallway, pulling at the door and stepping out into the porch area, breathing in the midnight air and eyes wide with fear. Nobody there. "Idiot," the voice remarked with cold indifference. "Where are you? Where the fuck are you, damn it?" I screamed as a neighbor looked out of their window with concern, promptly closing the curtains as I met their gaze. "You're losing it, honey. They can't see what you see. They can only see your steady, ugly demise," the voice cooed, a feeling of both dread and terror once again seeping in to replace anger. "You're going to get the cops called on you if you don't put your mask back on. Come on now. You've always been so good at the mask." Ugly memories floated to the surface. All the time I had to pretend I hadn't been crying, suppress my emotions so it didn't make my ex madder, hiding the bruises and burn marks to make sure I always looked my best. Tears flooded my eyes, and I ran back inside, slamming the door and rushing to my bathroom to take something, anything, to numb the pain in my head and in my ears. But the voice was unrelenting. "You know, if you took all those pills in your medicine cabinet right now, nobody could stop you. They wouldn't even find you until it was too late. Just throwing it out there." My hand shook as I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to get a grip. I saw myself and felt nothing but disgust. Weather-beaten skin, unkempt beard, and bags under my eyes strong enough to pull my face down like a terrifying droopy impression. Even in my resigned tone, as I audibly responded to the voices in my head, it was a caricature of those Debbie Downer characters you see in cartoons. Only I was seriously taking the words in my head into consideration. "You're not real. Even if you were, people would care and they would find me." I put some lotion on my face, desperate to get the feeling of rejuvenation back into my flesh, to feel something other than constant exhaustion and numbness. "Perhaps they do care, but they're too busy to check in. Isn't that worse? That they have the capacity to care for you, to cherish you, yet they don't act on it," the voice murmured in my ear, a gravelled, mocking tone that reverberated around my skull. "They'll be sad when you die, sure. Perhaps even a few tears at the funeral. But they'll move on. The hands of time will turn as they always do. The world will continue to rotate. And you'll be nothing more than a black, small stain in people's memories. That's all you are. You know. A black stain. Not a real man, just a spineless little worm. She told you as much. What was it she said the last time you saw her?" "She said that no one would ever love me the way she did. They wouldn't understand my issues, and they wouldn't want to deal with me. That I was ugly inside and out, that I... I paused, looking at my face once more, and an ugly, terrifying realization overcame me.
Yes? Go on, I want to hear you say it,
the voice hissed, but I was beyond it for the first time this began.
That I was full of parasites, just waiting to become one myself. I just needed the right push, an earworm.
I breathed, the penny dropping and my stomach contracting as what little food I had was brought up into the sink. The pain nearly sent me to my knees. I barely remember the next couple of hours, only that I was able to block out the incessant scratching and screaming from the voice, long enough to call an ambulance before I succumbed to the pain. When I came to, I was sitting upright in a hospital bed with a concerned doctor looking over me, 2 assistant nurses by her side.
Mr. Mullaney, I'm Dr. Somersault, the primary care physician. I'm the one overlooking your care tonight. Now, before we start, I need you to remain calm, okay?
I nodded, mouth feeling like it was full of ash. I tried to put my arm up and felt the resistance around my wrist. Looking down, I saw both were strapped to the sides of the bed, before looking up with concern.
We found you with a self-inflicted wound to your head and a stomach full of pills. This is a necessary precaution to ensure you won't harm yourself again. Now, I want you to be comfortable, but first we need to talk about what happened. Can we do that?
I nodded, a feeling of shame overcoming me as she made some notes.
What made you want to hurt yourself like this? I know we've only just met, and you're not likely to tell me much, but I didn't do this because I wanted to.
Feeling the tears in my eyes, I bit my lip.
You won't believe me if I tell you.
She leaned forward, hand on my wrist.
Try me. No judgment. There's a voice in my head telling me to do it. It said if I didn't behave, the shadow would come for me. It did. I caught it staring at me while I napped, and chased it out of the room.
Well, the doctor's face betrayed the promise, and I tried to finish before they sedated me.
I know it sounds crazy, but I realized something before I made the emergency call. If I'm wrong, you can send me away.
Her eyes glistened, and to my immense relief, she nodded. And as I beckoned her to lean in, I whispered the most important words I'd ever spoken in my life.
Doc, there's something in my fucking ear.
She leaned back with a look of confusion before asking the nurse to bring over an otoscope to peer inside my right ear. I was shaking, knowing full well that if I was wrong, I wouldn't see the outside world for a long, long time. As the silence hung over us, I began to question if the voice was right, and I was truly a terribly broken person, worthy of the torment I suffered. Then I heard her gasp, and those 3 words punctured my soul.
Oh my God.
I was numbed and kept still as the instruments were brought in. I felt the scratching in my ear increase and then slowly but surely decrease as the lidocaine did its job. After the cold metallic forceps came in and clamped down, a slow pulling motion was followed by a feeling of immense relief and sounds of abject disgust from the room as they wrenched the little bastard free. I know it was dead, but I swear to you I heard the carapace crunch, the mandibles snap, and the little fucker hiss as it was taken from its burrow in my ear canal. Every section of it was writhing and flailing as it desperately tried to get back inside. I breathed a sigh of relief, and in a shaky voice I asked what it was.
It's an earwig. Oh, a big one at that. 2 inches maybe. Well, that thing was in deep. No wonder you felt such discomfort.
I laughed, a genuine, happy laugh that I hadn't experienced in a long time.
Yeah, I guess that'd explain the voices to her.
Silence fell over the room once more, and I heard hurried footsteps gather around the doctor as she did some fiddling and furtive whispering to her colleagues.
Is, everything okay? You've not found another one, have you? Mr. Mullaney, you said this shadow person visited you in the night. Yeah, ran off as I chased them.
Nothing outside, so I assumed it was a part of this whole psychosis experience. Why? Do you have any enemies? Maybe a bitter ex? I paused. Well, this was unexpected, and I didn't know what to say. She must have sensed my trepidation and pressed me again. Talk to me. It'll make this part easier. I need you to keep calm while I inspect deeper into the ear, okay? Well, I shrugged and agreed, telling her about my recent ex-partner, who we'll call Michelle. We'd met through an online group where we posted memes, shared thoughts, and tried to escape from the hellfire of the world through dark humor. Granted, there were times she'd say things I was unsure were legitimate or not, but overall, she was sweet. We met up a few times before deciding to give it a go, and when we weren't spending time with each other, we had regular calls over Discord. Things weren't too bad at first, but she started getting possessive, telling me I needed to lose more weight to be hot. That I wasn't a real man because I hated conflict and wouldn't rise to her taunts. On one night, while making us dinner, I accidentally cut my hand while cooking. Blood sprayed across my kitchen countertop as I was writhing in agony while she just watched, a disturbing smile on her face, before she broke out into laughter. And it just escalated from there, forcing me to do things I didn't want, cutting me off from old friends and family by convincing me they hated me, exacerbating my mental health, that I was far worse than I actually was. She sapped away every facet of my life till I was a husk of a person. Then came the night when I stood up for myself. I came home from work late and saw her in bed with someone else. Despite everything, I was furious, and I demanded they both leave since it was my home. She just sat there, laughing in his arms and pointing at me as he joined in. What the fuck is a little beater bitch like you gonna do about it? This is why you'll die alone without me. You can't get anyone else. You're pathetic. Not a real man like him. She carried on with him as if I wasn't there, in my own bed. I felt violated and sick, but for the first time in my life, I stood my ground. I grabbed an ornament from the shelf and launched it at the guy's face, smashing his nose and staining my bedsheets as he rolled around screaming. She froze and looked at me with fury. Who do you think you are? Get the fuck out before I punish you, she bellowed, but I took a step forward and saw her recoil like the snake she was. My house, not yours. You have 15 minutes to get your shit and leave. The police will be here either way. I felt the words escape my lips with cold indifference as her bravado came back. I'll tell him you assaulted him, assaulted me. Then what? She smirked, comforting her lover. Without any hesitation, I smashed my face into the doorway and called the emergency line in a panic, declaring I had a home invasion. They'd assaulted me. They were hauled off without any issue, and I still remember her threat as the restraining order was put on her. You'll never be rid of me, I promise. As I finished, I heard one of the nurses leave the room and asked where she was going. The police. I've got good news and bad news, Mr. Mullaney, she said, taking in a short breath. The good news is you won't be hearing any voices anymore. The bad news... I trembled as I felt her unfasten the wrist guards and walk around me, showing me something on a napkin she'd pulled away from my ear. It was a speaker. A tiny, home-built Bluetooth speaker. And I knew exactly who it belonged to. You weren't hearing any voices of your own, Mr. Mullaney. You were hearing hers. Nature can produce its own evil, by Weird Bryce-Scott. Like a claustrophobic fetus, it pushed itself from out of the rainy muck. What was born of it, I'm still not sure. I watched, disgusted as it put itself together, or was put together by some invisible external force. Spontaneous generation? The byproduct of random subatomic chaos. I'd been on my way from the library, stayed late in the night to do some personal research, the topic of which is irrelevant for the moment. I just made it to the street of my apartment when I saw that thing, assuming form, stirring in the mud and filth. I stopped just feet from the entrance, intrigued by the sight, clueless to its true horrid nature. There was only one streetlight nearby, and its bulb cast a sallow glow over my side of the street, spotlighting me while leaving its berth behind a curtain of shadows. Drawn toward it, and pulled to it as if attached by string, I left the safety of light and structure to investigate the weird phenomenon manifesting in the dark. I, a first-year student at the local college, is still an ignorant child to the world and its secrets, its horrors. While it had been quiet before, gestating in the darkness, it now emitted a soft murmur as I approached. It cooed like a bird, albeit one that had somehow attained the mechanical vocality of a robot. It sounded artificial, but not intimidatingly so. I was reminded of a toy, left out in the rain, the button responsible for its simple vocal features triggered by the wind. I stood before it, baffled. I couldn't tell what I was looking at. There was a shape, a form, but not one I recognized, not one I could give a name to. Dead leaves armored it, grime was its flesh, and yet to say anything else about it would be guesswork, baseless speculation. Part of me wanted to pick it up, to caress it. Another part cringed inwardly, sensed with an innate precognition the utter wrongness of it, the logic-defying unreality of its existence. I don't know which part would have won. The choice was taken from me before I could act. The thing sprang up like a cat, having apparently finished its indescribable self-creation. It enveloped my head, pressed itself painfully against my skull. My screams were swallowed up, absorbed by its suctioning flesh. Every sound uttered was played back directly into my ears. The pain of this intracranial echo only served to make me scream more. I was caught in a terrifying and excruciating feedback loop. I struggled against it even as I deafened myself with my own screams. My hands tried to claw at it, to pry it away from my head. But my fingers couldn't find leverage. It seemed to shift and swell and deflate, deftly avoiding my grasp while simultaneously performing that horrible vocal playback. I didn't wonder how I was able to breathe. Didn't have the clarity of mind for such a thought. I only wanted to get the thing off, to silence the endlessly echoing shrieks. Eventually it became too much. I disoriented myself in my thoughtless panicking and finally fell to my knees in the middle of the street. I couldn't see, but vaguely knew that I'd wandered away from its birthplace beside the gutter. Dazed and enfeebled, I weakly slapped my hands against this horror. The blow sounded inside my skull, giving me a thrumming bass line to my waning cries. Just as I was about to give in, whatever that would mean, I couldn't even imagine, I remembered that I had my phone in my pocket. As the thing pulsed atop my head, impressing itself flatly upon my face, I reached into my pocket and withdrew my phone. Thankfully, I'd chosen to have my biometrics as an option for unlocking it. With a singular focus, I pressed my thumb against the screen until I felt the soft tremble of the phone unlocking. Muscle memory guided me to my dialer. Later on, I thanked myself for having spent so much time using this damn thing. Blindly, I dialed 911. Panic threatened to make me vomit, but the stark fear of drowning in my own acrid bile kept my esophagus tight. I knew that I needed to get this thing off of me, regardless of whether or not I managed to call for help. Just as I was about to hit the call button, the phone was snatched from my hand. There was a thud against my head and a faint light entered my vision. With newfound horror, I realized that the skull-clinging parasite had absorbed my phone. I started screaming again. My scalp began to itch, and the inability to scratch it only pushed me further towards complete mental collapse. Meanwhile, the thing played with my phone, going through the menus and apps, a surmise based on the continuously shifting light before my eyes. I couldn't see what it was doing, only that it was doing something. With intelligence, awareness of its actions? Well, I couldn't say. I didn't care. I'd been ready to give up, but the phone's availability had rekindled my spirit. Now despair seemed into my mind as the body intruder seemed to mock me with the very object that had given me hope. My whimpering, I'd lost the energy for screaming, was interrupted by a sudden sound, an unsettlingly familiar series of them. Numbers were being dialed, not dumbly or haphazardly pressed, but carefully dialed in a measured sequence. This unprecedented display of intelligence silenced me, chilling me down to my rattling bones. A moment later, the hum of a call being placed reverberated cranially. I froze, my hands locked in useless claws. Whereas before I'd been desperate to make a call, I now prayed for the phone to die, or at least for the call to be dropped. My hopes were dismissed, my fears actualized, when a voice answered the ringing. Seeming to emerge from the core of my mind, I listened as my mother, the one for whom I'd been reading up on cancer, asked if everything was all right. She coughed. It was like a cerebral thunderclap. Even as I reeled from the sonic detonation, I shouted for her to hang up the phone. I didn't want her to have any kind of contact with this abysmal thing. But my protests went on unheard, instantly deafened by my head's hijacker as they left my lips. In a new exhibition of its plainly sinister intelligence, it spoke to my mother, using my own voice. With perfect vocal mimicry, it said, "Mom, I think you should just give up." My mother coughed again and replied, "What do you mean, hon?" My voice, appropriated without my consent, continued. "The cancer, I think you should let it win. You've been a terrible mother, a terrible wife. You don't deserve to survive this. Stop fighting." Well, I did throw up this time. Thankfully, the thing absorbed the filth, incorporating it into its own composition, or merely ejecting it externally, I don't know. The things that it had said, the lies, they sickened me, enraged me. My mother had been a wonderful wife during my father's life, and continued to be an amazing mom after his death and after her diagnosis. She'd taken care of me and supported me through my grief, even as that evil began its inimical occupancy of her body. The shock, the undeserved hurt in her voice brought my hands back to my parasite's exterior. I clawed madly at it, stopping only to hear her mortified response. Why would you say that?" With a calmness that made me choke and gurgle in disbelief, it said, "Because it's true. Just let it kill you." The call was abruptly, coldly ended in the middle of her anguished gasp. I raged like an animal for who knows how long. Thought and sanity gave way to feral animosity. My hands rained brutal blows upon my skull, acting of their own primal volition, my body galvanized by sheer indignant fury. A word like hate couldn't begin to describe the feeling I felt for that diabolical helmet. And yet it felt nothing. My attacks were fruitless. My ire probably fed it, acting as some kind of emotional nourishment for its wretched existence. Distantly, I felt, more than heard, the rapid approach of a car. Whatever was left of my sanity at that moment decided to take flight from my mind. All that remained of my psyche was a black animus for revenge. I needed to destroy this thing, not for what it was doing to me, but for what it had said to my mother. My skin prickled, my instincts sensing the car, the danger it promised. I planted my feet in place, keeping my body rigid, willfully overriding its drive to move away. In a dark twist of irony, I felt myself grateful for the thing's bizarre imperceptibility. That, combined with my all-grey outfit, made me almost invisible in the night's gloom. Presumably understanding what I meant to do, it tried to steer me away, jerking my head around as if in doing so it could command my body. But it was useless. I stood firm, my resolve unwavering. I sensed it panicking, as if we shared a spiritual or telepathic link. A warm glow filled my vision, supplanting the white glimmer of my phone's screen. think I might have heard the screech of tires on asphalt, but I'm not sure. A moment later, I was struck with such tremendous force that the pain didn't even register until I'd landed. Lying there, impossible to tell if I was face up or down, feeling weightless in my blind agony, I felt the thing die with me. Our pain was shared. It subsumed my debility, made it its own, and spat it back in me when it couldn't handle it. Cyclic suffering, recursive wretchedness. When it died, truly, the dark Stygian night that had been my vision opened, revealing a soothingly natural sky, a softer, welcoming darkness. Through the cavity that had opened in the dead thing, I felt the chill air on my hot cheeks. The comforting touch somehow stifled the body-wide suffering. With trembling arms, one of which I would later learn had been broken by the impact, I peeled away from the rest of the parasite's corpse. It felt weirdly soft in my hands, like a pillow, and I was hit with a pang of embarrassment at having let such a seemingly delicate thing overwhelm me. I let flaps fall sideward, and my hands with them. I surrendered to what I'd thought was my own death, just as footsteps came rushing over. I'm in the hospital now. My wounds have been treated, my bones set, tears sewn, taped, and bandaged. The driver was drunk, had been speeding down the street after having spent a night at the bar drowning his own sorrows. The irony, his wife had just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Cyclic suffering. He's fine. He's sitting in a cell unharmed. My unusual response to this information, sardonic giggling, was attributed to the head trauma I'd received, which the doctors couldn't account for given its nature. I remember hearing confused whispering in my pre- and post-surgery hazes. Phrases, strange lacerations, and suction marks were a few of several that had floated to me through the mental fogs. They hadn't recovered it at the accident site. Couldn't explain the abnormal marks it had left on my skull and face. I spoke to my mother, who, despite what I had said, still cried and prayed for me over the phone. I tried to apologize, but she quickly dismissed the attempt. The guilt of what had happened, she was callously told, even though I wasn't the one at fault, tore at me, drained me of the energy my body desperately needed to recuperate. She said she'll be by to visit me tomorrow, when her nurse can accompany her. I told her that I loved her, that I couldn't wait to see her. I think she was relieved by that. I spent the last few hours typing this out on my phone. Somehow, I survived the impact. Someday I'll share this with her. Let her know what really happened. If I tried tomorrow, she'd only think it was a side effect of the drugs I've been given, or the head trauma, and that would only hurt her more. I don't want her worrying about my mind and my body. I'll just have to think of a plausible explanation for that terrible phone call. Somehow I'll have to contextualize those vile words. I've never really thought about an afterlife, about hell, but I hope that odious creature is burning in some flaming pit. I wouldn't be surprised if it was originally conceived in one. Well, my dear friends, beautiful day here. Very, very unsettling in a way for almost the middle of November. We've been up nearly to 20 degrees today, beautiful sunny day, out in a t-shirt. Something about it doesn't seem right to me, to be honest, but anyway, who am I to complain? It was a beautiful day. We did some stuff in the garden, and I came in and I thought, well, let's do another one of these compilation videos for you. I told you I wouldn't be making a habit of it, so there might not be another one of these for a while, but another great collection of stories. I hope you will agree. Well, my dear friends, that is it for this beautiful Sunday. Back again tomorrow. Till then, my dear friends, sleep well, yeah?
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.